you for joining us on this NAPA night, and we'll get started.
Fantastic. Thank you for having me. I can see that there's a few names and people that I recognize on the list. It's lovely to see you guys tonight. I just wanted to do a little bit of a presentation about what an orthotist is, what we do, why C1, and answer a few questions, common questions that I often get asked, and any other questions that you may have about the clinics that I will be doing at NAPA on a Friday once a month, and any other questions you may have about just orthotics in general. So feel free to use this as a bit of a ongoing discussion, and if we can't get to your question today, feel free to email us and let me know, because I'll be able to talk to you down the track as well. So who is Ability Made? We currently create and design 3D printed orthotic products for kids, and we specialize in kids at this point in time. We have seen lots of different clients of different age groups previously, and we do work with many different facilities. So just because you don't necessarily come to Ability Made doesn't mean you may not have seen one of our products before. We are a social enterprise with a mission to increase access to orthotic services or people with disability. You'll probably have seen a few things on our website as well. So what do we do? We're a team of engineers. We collaborate with orthotists. I'm actually one of the orthotists. They've brought me on board to develop develop this NAPA clinic, so I can be on site at NAPA on that Friday for you and your kids, just to make everything a little bit easier. But we try and make sure that everything that we're doing is always changing and always developing to make sure that your children get the best quality outcomes possible. So who am I? Paul did a lovely job of introducing me before. My name is Michaela. I'm an orthotist. I graduated in 2018 from La Trobe University. I have been working a lot in pediatrics over the last few years, and I have recently moved to Sydney about a year ago. So I look forward to meeting more people while I'm down here and seeing you guys all at the clinics. Can we move to the next slide? Fab. All right. So what is an orthotist and why C1? An orthotist is someone who specializes in supporting body alignment by designing supports to help somebody's limb that may not originally act typically or just to help them walk. It could be positioning, it could be walking, it could be standing. So it really just depends on what your goals are and whether you're able to achieve them. If you can't achieve them, or you've noticed that your child can't quite achieve them yet, do give us a call, let us know, and we can definitely discuss what may be going on. Normally we talk to physios and get a lot more in-depth information while we do initial assessments to verify exactly the issue at hand. We see children of all sorts of different conditions. Oh, what happened? We go back to that slide. Fab. We see children of all sorts of different conditions. So just because your child's condition may not necessarily be on the slide in front of you, doesn't mean I won't see them. Also, if they don't have a diagnosis, it doesn't mean, again, that I won't see them. There's a lot of kids that don't necessarily have a formal diagnosis that I do see. So if you do have any questions, again, feel free to let me know. But what we do require is a physio referral to make sure that both the physio who's doing all the therapy work with you weekly is aware of potential orthotic intervention and the consideration for it as well. So basically what we'll do is I'll assess the child and see if an AFO is something that may be necessary or something that you'd be interested in to help them get to the next level in their therapy treatment or just in daily living. So what are AFOs and what can they do for you? AFO we go to the next slide, thank you. AFO is an acronym for ankle foot orthosis. Basically, it's a piece of material that is contoured directly to the leg, which we will custom design in most cases through casting or scanning. The AFO generally will go from the bottom of the knee, around the ankle, under the foot to the end of the toe, which we design in different ways for different specifications so that we get the correct outcome and isolate a problem. They come in different materials, colors, shapes, sizes. Most of what we do is custom made, but we do have off-the-shelf options as needs be. Generally speaking, once you're coming to a specialized orthotist, you've probably exhausted what you can access through physiotherapy and other therapy lines, and we'll be designing a support specifically tailored to what your kid needs. Some of these AFOs will have joints which have moving articulated parts. Some may be solid. We have a different system as well called dynamic. These are the three main mechanical types, and we also do hybrid styles that combine different aspects to specially isolate exactly what the child needs. We also do things called SMOs. Now, SMOs are a very short version of an AFO. They don't do any restriction or adaptation of what we call sagittal plane alignment. So that's forward and backwards. And what that one does is it allows all this forward and backward movement while controlling the ankle posture. Solid AFOs are particularly rigid. They do not move, and that is for a particular reason. So just because it is solid does not mean that it is bad. That is something that I will cover later on in this presentation. That is a major misconception of solid AFOs. People can get a little bit scared when I prescribe solid AFOs, but I do promise they are there for a reason. The length, another question I tend to get is the length of AFO use. So just because I prescribe something now doesn't mean it won't change down the track. So I may prescribe a solid AFO to start with and then move to a dynamic system if I need to. The difference between a dynamic system and an articulated system is it still allows forward movement, but with resistance. So it's elasticated movement. It does not completely restrict like a solid, but it does not completely passively move like an articulated. So it's a little bit in between. And we can get dynamic systems and design dynamic systems that have different rigidity components. What that means is some are super flexible and allow a lot of bend, and others may be a little bit more stiff, allowing less bend. And again, we will calibrate that to function, biomechanics, weight, and size as well. At the end of the day, the goal is to get children to a level of independence and activity that helps them reach their goals. Sometimes that requires them to wear a support to attain a particular level of activity, and I may be giving them something for physio day to day and then something different for everyday walking as well, because those are two very different activities and they may need two different types of supports. I would say AFOs are kind of like equipment for high-level sports. So with athletes, they will often have equipment and things that they use to help them get to that next level in their athletic capabilities. For many of the children that orthotists see, walking is their sport, or they may actually have a sport and they just are struggling to keep up with their friends. So again, we'll design that orthotic component with different trim lines exactly for what they need, just to help isolate a problem and help them achieve that next level of activity. So we do want to keep them mobile. It is not about hindering them in any way. It is purely about obtaining more goals and being able to get to their next level in their therapies or just everyday living and community access as well. So common misconceptions. A question I get asked really often, if you go to the next slide, thank you, is will Orthotics or AFOs make my child weaker or hinder their development or progress. That's a bit of a long answered question, but I'll try and keep it down to a really short amount of time. The answer to that is generally no, if it is done correctly. If AFOs are used in the appropriate way, we sometimes are aiming to actually reduce the impact a muscle is having on a person's gait pattern or walking pattern. And in this case, yes, we probably are trying to hinder that particular muscle's development in that way. So for children with spasticity, they may struggle to get through certain ranges of movement, which we want to try because the muscle is pulling them down. We want to mitigate that problem and allow the rest of the body to move as it should without having the impact of that muscle causing them to slow down or bring them down to ground level, for example, crouch. In other cases, in most cases, we are actually trying to strengthen children. If they are able to do the next level of activity and their congenital or just biological diagnosis is not allowing them to walk, if they can do that in an AFO, they are exercising, they're strengthening, and if they're moving, they're actually doing more activity. If you were to sit down all day, every day, you wouldn't be getting stronger in your core, in your balance, in other muscles that are actually not impacted as well. So if, for example, if you're hemiplegic, only on the one side is affected, but so heavily affected that you really struggle to walk without assistive technology, if you were to sit down all day, then your good side may be heavily affected by the lack of activity. So having an AFO does not hinder that process. It actually encourages additional movement, additional activity, and being able to access things independently. So we want to make sure that we really hone into that when we prescribe AFO. So no, it shouldn't make them weaker as long as you are isolating the problem and you're not over prescribing different things. So again, if you've got any questions as to why I'm prescribing something for your child, if I am prescribing something for your child, please just ask me the question, because there's generally a reason behind it, and I would be more than happy to explain it to you so you know exactly what's going on. I can understand it's really frustrating when clinicians just go, here's a thing for your kid, please use it. I wouldn't do that. Just let me know that you do have questions about the prescription, and I would be absolutely happy to explain that with you. If you're finding a particular part of that prescription is hindering a particular activity or is hindering their progress in any way, shape or form, please do tell me, because I'll change it and make sure that it matches their everyday activity as well. Okay. Excellent. Another common misconception with AFOs is that moving joints are better than solid AFOs. A lot of people like movement because they don't want to lock everything up. This can be beneficial and detrimental in two very different ways. So, for example, moving AFOs allow excessive dorsiflexion. Okay, what that means is the foot is able to come up. In cases like crouch, so where the knees are heavily bent and the child is crouching like in a squat position down to the ground, moving joints are generally not necessarily the first point of call that we go to because they're allowing this excessive movement. What we as orthotists will generally try to do in a case like this is bring those knees back into extension, bring them up into a really nice neutral alignment to maintain as they're walking through their gait cycle. To do this, we need to actually restrict that range of motion. And for cases, for example, with hypotonia, which is a lot of muscle weakness, I tend to find a dynamic system works really well because it allows them to still have their more natural center of gravity, and the device will yield. It doesn't push them around like a really rigid AFO will do. So that generally keeps them quite stable on the ground, but allows them sort of the anti-gravity resistance to keep them upright. And generally people can walk for a little bit of a longer distance as well with that. On the other side of that, we've got weakness, and then we've got high spasticity and tone. So if you've got as I said earlier in this presentation, if you have a muscle that's really pulling quite strongly down to the ground, so for example, hamstrings or the calves, you may find that children will struggle to get that end range, to get back into that extension range and hold themselves up against the muscle that's pulling them down. For that reason, we need something stronger, something that's really pulling them back. So getting the resistance higher and higher and higher to try and force that muscle back is really important. And that's where solid AFOs really come into play there. Depending whether they've got spasticity or weakness, it completely depends on the child as to which route we go down. Every case is different, so don't take those two examples word for word. Every single case is completely different. So again, if you're having questions as to why one thing over another, please feel free to ask me, because I will always answer that question. So getting an AFO, what is the process and what can you expect? Alrighty. So first thing we want to do is we'd like you to register your interest with Ability Made. We will have a QR code at the end of this presentation that you can lock onto, or you can go onto the link that I believe is in the chat function of this presentation. Register that interest and let us know that you want more information. The next thing I'll get you to do is arrange funding and discuss things with your physio. It's really important that you discuss things with your physio. I will always request a referral. So if you've requested that you would like an initial assessment, you've given me some information, first thing I do is I call your physio. And if they're not expecting my call, or they don't know that you're looking at potential orthotic intervention, it's a bit of an awkward discussion at that point, especially if we're starting to talk about their therapy and how AFOs or other orthotic intervention could potentially benefit your child. So always let your physio know first. They will write me a referral if they haven't already and send it through prior to their initial orthotic assessment. At that initial assessment, we will go through that exact referral. I'll double check all the information, make sure everything is exactly what it needs to be. Sometimes I do find that parents will change a couple of things between the referral and the initial assessment, so I'll just make sure everything's all right. I will actually have a look at your child's feet. I'll have a look at their gait if they are walking, or if they're not walking, again, I'll have a look at their positioning. And then we will discuss together different orthotic solutions that may benefit your child if there is one. If there is not something off the shelf, which generally there is not, I will custom design that support. I will always work with your goals, whether they are orthotic, positional or therapy or just community goals, because there may be some situations that one thing does not cover all of your goals, in which case I'll supply multiple different styles of devices to make sure that your child's needs are met in every aspect of their life, not just physio or not just every day. Okay. Next thing we'll do is report and quote. So once you and I and your child have come to a mutual agreement as to what the best course of action and planning is for their orthotic treatment, I will write that a big old report for NDIS to make sure that your funding is evidence-based and that you are aware and NDIS aware of what the funding is being used for. The Ability Made office will do up a quote. We'll send that through to hopefully get funded. Next thing I'll get you to do is obtain additional funding if you need to. In some cases, you'll already have funding that you need to use, which is why you're coming to see me midway through a plan. And in other cases, you'll find that there are, you're going for an early plan review or just a major plan review, in which case, again, I'll write probably a slightly different report that's a little bit more in depth to try and get funds added into your assisted technology budget. When that funding comes through, I will get you guys back in for a scan or cast. I will decide on the day whether we do a scan or whether we do a cast, depending on what I think is best for your child. That is a point in time where I take measurements and I get that that mold and that contour really on point. And we'll also discuss design options. So design options for me are things like trim lines and extra little biomechanical things I want to add into the orthosis and try and reduce its overall complexity and bulk so that it fits into different shoes as needs be. That is also the appointment that your kids get to choose colors. Now, we have a massive range of colors. I don't think I've ever seen so many range of colors from any facility ever. There's a massive range. So what we'll do, if you can't pick in that session, I will send you guys a link that you can go through at home in your own time. Okay, go through with your kids, go through with your family, and everyone can be all up on the big screen seeing what you would like to pick. All I ask is that you get back to me as soon as possible, because the longer you wait to let me know what colors you want, the longer it takes for me to actually create those AFOs. And if we miss the deadline for the next printing session, you'll find that your order will be delayed, and we may be delayed 1 month of the fitting appointments, because I'm only at NAPA one Friday every month. Next thing we'll do once your devices do come in is I'll get you back in and fitted with your supports. That's always really exciting. Kids get to see everything that they've picked, everything they've gone through to get to this point, and they get a new thing. So I will at that point make sure everything's fitting well. I'm not going to have any problems, or try and mitigate as many problems as possible before you take them home. And I will also watch them walk, and I'll fine tune, even though this is a custom device, there's usually little fine tuning things that I always need to do. So I'll just make sure that is fully fine tuned, ready for you to take home. Once you have taken that home, I will get you back in for a review, whether it is in person or online. I would like to do a review, because it just means that I'm getting updated information as to how these supports have gone. Whether it's good news or bad news, I would like to know. If it's good news, that's great. If it's bad news, I can fix it. Please tell me if you're having problems, because I will absolutely fix the problem, okay? We are extremely receptive to feedback here at Ability Made, so we would love to know if we can improve anything, change anything. If you're getting red marks and you're not sure if it's a problem, take photos, send them in. Someone in the office will get back to you as soon as possible. And if they don't know how to get back to you, they'll contact me, and I will also get back to you in that case. If we feel like it's an issue that you need to come in for, again, we'll let you know. If it's something I feel like you can fix remotely with a few little things, again, I will let you know. Okay. So about our new clinics at NAPA. Next slide. Beautiful. I will be there every month on a Friday, once a month on a Friday. So if you want to register, there is a QR code on the next slide. That's it, that you can have a look at. Otherwise, there are links. I believe we may have a few questions that I can answer as well. I know that was a little bit quick. It's just a bit of a quick overview and overshot of kind of what we do. But yeah, I'd love to answer your questions if you do have any. Oh, Paul, you're muted.
Hi there. Thanks for that. Thanks, Michaela. Thank you for that, Michaela. Thanks for running through the ins and outs of orthotics and everything that Ability Made do, and we'll be doing at the NAPA clinics. I don't think we have any questions come through just as yet. I don't know if I'm going to do a call out to everyone. Has anyone got any questions, particularly for Michaela? You've got an experienced orthotist in front of you here. You can ask any question you may like while we've got her on your screens. I know that we've had quite a few people, I think, down in Melbourne not being able to log in tonight because of the storms down there. Right. And I've received a few messages, so they'll be able to watch this this recording once we send the link out tomorrow. But I do have a question that's come through from Brooke for you, Michaela. So I'll fire that one off to you. How long does an orthotic last? A 3-year-old grows, for example, does it only last? So 3-year-old grows, does it only last for one shoe size or 1 year?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. So with orthotics for kids are very different to orthotics for adults because kids do grow. Now, I would suggest that if they've gone up a shoe size, they probably need a new AFO. Orthotics should last, depending on what it's made from, will last a certain length of time, whether it's 2 years or 5 years or somewhere in between. It also depends on how active they are. I've had kids I have remade AFOs for every 3 months just because of major growth spurts. Other kids have been in them for about 2 years. So if they have grown, that's probably the main reason that we do replace them. If they've gone up a shoe size, that means that their foot has grown, which means the bony parts in their foot are no longer sitting in relief spots that we have put into those devices. As bones move, little concave areas may start digging in. And yes, they'll need new AFOs. One of the major things or indications to get a new AFO is if they have they've been totally fine, no problems, and all of a sudden they're causing problems out of nowhere. They're causing redness, they're causing blistering. That generally means they have grown out of it or their toe is all the way at the edge. With toe plates for kids, I do tend to leave about a thumb width, kind of like you would with a shoe, which is an indicator to get a new set, even if they're not really causing any problems, because problems are anticipated after that point. But again, if they're not causing any major issues, they're not heavily worn and torn, they should theoretically be safe to use, but do make sure you are in constant contact with your orthotist, at the very least doing, I would say, a 6-month review just to make sure everything is okay. They will tell you, they'll give you the thumbs up if it is okay, because we do want to make sure that obviously we're not overdoing, repeats of the exact same thing if it's totally fine. And we will fix any major issues. So that's the other nice thing about particular materials, is there is adjustability, which is why we use particular materials for kids that we don't use for adults, and vice versa, to make sure that we have that adjustability as they grow, and it just helps those AFOs last a little bit longer.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Michaela. Don't forget to send through a question if you got one in the chat, and we'll try and get to that one before we draw to a close. Michaela, do you have any suggestions, particularly working in the pediatric space, around better footwear that or brands that maybe are more accommodating of an AFO?
Yeah, absolutely. I get that one a lot as well. So with AFOs, obviously they're quite chunky, they're quite big. In most cases, normally you do need to go up a shoe size. Different shoes have different components in them that will make the child walk differently. Okay, so if you are looking at something flat like a Billy shoe, I'm sure a lot of you guys will know about Billy from the Billy footwear from the Every Human website. They're these beautiful sort of Converse-y style shoe options that have these nice big zips that go all the way around to help accommodate volume, open all the way up so that you don't have any squished little toes at the end of your shoes. So it's really nice, especially for kids that struggle to put their shoes on, have sort of clawing or scrunching toes, because you can make sure that they're not being jammed in their shoe. But they are beautifully stable, low to the ground, and flat. Now that is a really good component to help with what we call lever arms. So we can then push against the ground to hold them up against the gravity that may be pulling them back down. So something that's really flat is really stable, but it may not be necessarily conducive for forward momentum and gait. So in those cases, that's why many joggers, off-the-shelf joggers, have these big toe rockers. Okay, so a little bit bendy at the toe. What that does is it helps you propel forwards, it helps you move forwards. It doesn't hold you back. Okay. In cases like toe walking and crouch and things where we're actually trying to get more knee extension, trying to hold back, flatter shoes do tend to be a little bit better because we can really push against the ground. Whereas in cases that are struggling to move forwards, you may find something with a bit more of a bendy toe is a lot more helpful. So depending on your AFO will depend on what type of shoe works better for your kid. I would always ask your orthotist footwear options, and if they're swapping between different options as well, please let us know because we often fine tune them differently. Some shoes have big heels, big what we call pitches, and they angle down like joggers, again, to give that forward momentum. Billy shoes being really flat don't have this angle, which means we may have to prop them up with heel wedges and different things as well. So you may find you have a set of heel wedges in one pair, maybe not, or different ones in another pair. They do need to be fine-tuned to the AFO. So just going to grab a random pair of shoes for random use on an occasion, you may find your child does walk differently. So just be wary of that when you are purchasing footwear, and do let us know because we will have options.
So in an ideal world then, Michaela, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Should we buy the shoe first and then get the AFO to fit that, or the other way around?
Yeah, that's a bit of a hard one, and that's often the thing I struggle with most is, do we get an AFO or do we get the shoes? And it depends on the case. In most cases, I'll do the AFO first so I can really see how that AFO is going to affect things. Sometimes I have access to fit kits of different types of footwear. If I have access to that, then I can actually troubleshoot that in the clinic, which means that you know exactly what size, what type, what style of shoe is most conducive to their walking to help with the AFO. If you would like to go outside of those sort of parameters and experiment with different shoes, I am okay with that personally, but I would just like to know about it so that I can make sure that I fine tune it correctly. In some cases, I've actually done shoe modifications to put rockers on certain footwear that wouldn't necessarily be built with it off the shelf because they wanted to wear a really nice pair of shoes at a wedding, but they weren't able to get forwards in these fancy shoes, and because they generally wear joggers. And so I was able to modify this sole unit so that I could help them get forwards, but they still had their fancy leather dress-like shoes just for cosmetic reasons. It's really important to make sure that everyone loves what they're wearing. So we try and make not only the AFOs really happy and colorful and vibrant, so that it feels personal. It's also really important that they're wearing shoes that they like, that they don't hate, that they're not heavy and ugly and chunky, that they feel comfortable and empowered in. So yeah, always a question and always an option. If you find anything as well online or in store, please tell me, because I get some of the best referrals through parents doing research. So do let me know if any new things come on the market, or you found something, or you've troubleshooted something at home and going, hey, this is really working. Tell me, because there's a high likelihood I can pass that information on to someone else that might be in a similar situation.
Okay, great. All right, LG's asking, what are your thoughts on supportive shoes like first walkers for kids with low tone or hypermobility versus something more rigid like SMOs? At what point would you recommend considering SMOs or other type of orthotics?
Yeah, so SMOs are basically the custom version of first walkers, and they turn many different types of shoes into a supportive first walker style. So you could have something that's really flexible, like a Billy, that comes in the different styles, and you just transfer the support system to the different types of shoes. First walkers are great, really stable, great for kids with low tone, because they get their base of support a little bit more rigid, and they've got resistance, something they can lean against, something that holds them up against that gravity. They're not just collapsing to the ground. Where I would start moving between just off-the-shelf supportive shoes to the next level of SMOs is if custom support is required. So if their foot and ankle is completely collapsing, I see that quite a lot where the foot has collapsed. Some people haven't necessarily noticed inside the shoe, and we get tight calves as a result of growth with a pronated position. So if they seem to be at neutral or at what we call plantigrade, so a nice right angle here with the shank and the foot, but what's actually happening is that foot position is compromised and it's compensating. So if I balance their what we call a subtalar joint, so one of the main joints in the ankle, make sure everything's really nice and aligned, is the foot then goes from this position and starts pointing down. That indicates calf tightness. So if you're noticing any kind of calf tightness, if you're noticing any kind of significant ankle instability, or even if you have to keep replacing all of these shoes because of high levels of wear and tear, that's another thing. I have often made SMOs for children that have a constant from dragging their feet, constant repeat of footwear that needs to be bought. First walkers are fantastic, but they're mighty expensive. So sometimes it's a little bit nicer for parents just to be able to order online a new pair of Billies or joggers or something without having to go through the whole process of thousands of dollars of shoes.
Yeah. Tell us, you were talking through earlier that you had all the beautiful designs and the use of 3D printed versus plastics. What's the pros and cons of this new technology that you guys are applying?
Yeah, so 3D printed materials are really quite interesting. Different materials are good and bad in different scenarios. So just because I wouldn't necessarily say 3D printed is better than plastics or plastics are better than 3D printed. There's no better or worse. It's purely scenario based. So some kids will do better in plastics because of the material componentry that offers and the plasticity of the plastics. So as they grow, we can heat things out really easily. We can push it, we can change it, we can mold it, we can change shapes with plastics, which is really, really nice. The con to plastics is because it is nice and flexible. In order to get any kind of rigidity out of it, we do need to come up and around that leg. So we need to wrap things around. It does need to be a bit bulkier. In some cases, that's necessary to get a really nice ankle position. We do actually have to come all the way around. In other cases, we might be looking at slightly different things like knee position if the ankle is actually not too bad, and all sorts of different things. But plastics are beautiful in that they're flexible, but they can be bulky if you don't necessarily need all of that contoured support. In 3D printed materials, you have the ability to use less material to get a similar outcome or impact on the gait cycle. So when I was talking about the dynamic supports with an AFO, you'd need to with a plastic set, you'd need to come around the limb, the contour of the limb, to get resistance through the bend. Whereas with the 3D printed materials, we can have these really beautiful, sleek designs, less material, same amount of support system. So it's 3D printed materials are kind of like the carbon AFOs, but for pediatric use. So carbon AFOs, like the older PD struts, we still use those. We can actually integrate those into our systems, but I tend to find those are heavy, they're bulky, and you can get a really beautiful outcome with the 3D printed materials if bulk is sometimes an issue.
Perfect, thank you. Just a reminder to those online, if you do have a question, we're going to draw this to a close shortly. So this is your last chance to get your question into the chat. I'm going to fire one more at you, Michaela, for the moment. So Brooke says, so are blisters usually linked with bad fittings rather than an expected result of using AFOs for the first time? She's saying we don't have AFOs. They're just I think investigating, getting educated for now. But she's wondering whether or not blisters are to be expected, I guess.
Yeah, so I don't like blisters. Blisters are not fun for anybody, especially the kid wearing the AFOs. If redness is expected, redness is pressure. Pressure means control. Control means we're doing something. We're changing your child's gait. redness is not a problem, and redness sometimes can be mistaken for blisters. So do bear in mind that if it is just sort of global redness, that's actually not a bad thing. That means you're helping control that leg. If you're getting pinpointed redness, like on the end of a bone or one localized tiny little position, please let your orthotist know. That's generally a bit uncomfortable for the child. It can turn into a blister. When you get blisters in AFOs, that tends to be from rubbing. So articulated AFOs or AFOs that actually move, like dynamics in any particular way, you are more prone to get blisters in than something that is potentially solid. However, having said that, if the device is done up firmly, you shouldn't be moving enough to cause problems. And if it is, you tell us and we fix it. Okay, so don't be afraid if a blister does occur, but you do need to let us know really fast, because I don't want them to be uncomfortable. I want them to be functional. So yeah, just let us know if that is the case. I wouldn't expect a blister. I don't try and give people blisters, but it does happen on occasion. So yeah, just work with us, and we will make sure that everything's okay. However, yeah, sometimes you can't really avoid it. What I tend to find the most common cause of blisters is carers, parents, or school teachers, staffing. Do the straps that are on the AFO either not done up at all, or they are done up really loosely? So sometimes when people have blisters, they do the AFO loosely. If it's loose, there's space, which means there's room for movement. Movement causes rubbing, rubbing causes blisters. So keep everything done up firmly. Firmly is not a bad thing. Firmly means you're holding, which is good. Okay, that's probably my main piece of advice when it comes to blisters. Please do up your AFOs firmly.
Okay, great. All right, I'm going to fire a question at you. What about if you're in a position where you have to prioritize getting a set of AFOs for your child, for example, and you didn't necessarily aren't able to do that for all aspects of their life, would you suggest prioritizing the activity that they spend the majority of time in that footwear for? So, for example, I've got an active kid, they do sport, and I've got a kid that goes to school. Like, do we prioritize the school shoe because they spend, I don't know, 8 hours a day in that school shoe, as opposed to the sports shoe, which may only be 1 or 2 hours a day? Do we ideally want to do both? What's your advice in that regard?
It depends what the AFO is for. So if it is for just general everyday walking, then absolutely, I'd probably prioritize the school shoes. If it is primarily for sports or higher intensity activities so that they can keep up with their peers, then yeah, I'd probably prioritize the sports shoes. So in many cases, even if they've got one AFO, I do potentially give them 2 separate things for sports and walking. You've got high intensity and low intensity. I may even do a third thing for therapy, depending on what their therapies are. So different types of AFOs require different shoes. And I would generally like to give kids everything they need, not just one thing or the other. I understand that funding can sometimes be a problem with that. So if we do need to prioritize one thing over another, tell me what your biggest priority is, and that is what I will focus on. I had one even just the other day who has AFOs for everyday walking, but they just don't have anything for hydrotherapy. So we're making a specific pair of hydro shoes or hydro boots, so that they are able to engage with that activity and that therapy, because that is something that they don't have. They've only got funding for one pair of boots, but they're not really wearing the AFOs. Even though they have them, they're not wearing them for anything else. So do let me know what your priority is, and that is exactly what I will focus on. If I feel like something else probably should be slightly higher priority, I will have that discussion with you. But at the end of the day, you're the one living your life with your kids, so I will listen to what you need from me and we'll work with you.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Michaela. All right, we'll come towards the end of our evening there. I'm just going to quickly run you through our next 2 NAPA nights coming up. And whilst I'm running through that stuff, you've got the very last opportunity to drop a question for Michaela into that chat. You'll see on screen here is, oh, it's just popped off, but there was an email there that if you have any questions for the team at Ability Made, Michaela or the team, you can email them at clinics@abilitymade. It's MADE, not mate. So MADE.com. Their website is www.abilitymade.com, and there's a number on the screen as well. At the top of the chat function, if you scroll up, I think you should be able to scroll up. You'll see that there's the link for the actual NAPA clinics. So the NAPA clinics, which happen once a month, around about that once a month in our Sydney clinic only. You can access more information on that and submit an inquiry form, and you can see the actual dates that Michaela will be in the Sydney clinic. The dates are actually listed on there. So you can see that at www.abilitymade.com/NAPA-clinics. But a reminder that I will send out an email in the coming day with all those links for you, so you don't have to go writing them down as well. So just a couple of reminders of the upcoming NAPA nights. On the 27th of February, we have special NAPA nights on continence with our continence physiotherapist Kelly Vine and Stonewall nurse Natalie Gentle from Children's Nursing Queensland. So all the topics: bedwetting, continence, constipation, toileting, all that sort of stuff. So really interesting one for those of you who have kids of that age. And then in March, we have one hosted by Melanie Dimmitt, who wrote the special book on organisational hacks. She'll have hacks. She'll have a panel including Tara Thompson of Kindship, Jess Scully from At Sadie's Place, Tubi Funds, Eliana Joseph, and of course Mel will be talking about the wonderful Hibi app as well, which can help you organise all your information about your child. So those two upcoming NAPA nights will be happening over the next month or so, and you can get your tickets for that via the Eventbrite website. Now I'm just going to go to the end. I'll thank you for that. Zara's posted the link there. So if you look at the very bottom of that chat function, you'll see the link for the NAPA clinics as well. So anything else you wanted to finish on, Michaela?
Unless anyone else has any more questions, I think that's basically sums everything up. But yeah, if you do have any more questions, just let the Ability Made office know. They'll contact me, or we can even just do a telehealth. Even if it's just a discussion that you want to have, that's perfectly fine by me. So yeah, just give us a call, let us know.
Perfection. Well, thank you very much for your time tonight, Michaela, for sharing your knowledge and for answering those questions. We look forward to seeing you in the clinic on a regular basis at NAPA Sydney. And yes, thank you to everyone who tuned in tonight, and we will see you at our next NAPA night. Thank you.
No worries. See you, everybody. Has everyone got off the link?
I think we've still got one person. Here we go.